Hello, I'm so glad you're here. This is Jennifer McGuire, and today I have 3 fun interactive cards for you. These have a hidden door with a fun surprise behind it. Now, I will be using some fun products to create my first card, which is the one you see here. You can see there's a door on the tree that opens up to show some critters inside. Then I'll stretch the products and the technique to create a card that has a heart that hinges open like a door, and inside is a gift card. And then I'll make a card where a balloon has a hinge on it, and when you open the balloon up, you'll see cash inside. So just showing you different ways you can use the same technique or products and incorporate other things you may have. Just something fun and different, and I'm really excited to share them. I will be using Lawn Fawn products today. I hadn't used them in a while and I love everything they have. The nice thing is I'm using just a couple new things and a lot of much older products. But they do have a special right now that if you spend $60, you get a free stamp set. I will put the information about that in my YouTube description below. All right, let's get started. The products that I'm using today and that really inspired me are from Lawn Fawn, and they're called the Knock Knock Who's There dies. This set here is the basic one, the one that I will use on all 3 of my cards. They do have an add-on available called the rectangle doors, and the rectangle doors work with the first set on the left, but if you'd prefer a rectangle door, you could use that as opposed to the arch door that comes in the regular set. Now, I won't be using the rectangle one today, but know that anything I create today could be done with that. I will also show you how to use that first set along with other dies. Then there is a third product. This is the Knock Knock Who's There tree, and it works with the original die set too with that arch door. So I will be using the tree on my first card, the middle set there, the basic one on all 3 of my cards, and then the rectangle one I don't use, but know that it is an option. Lawn Fawn is one of my top 3 companies for making interactive dies. I love taking the interactive dies that they've planned out so well and use them along with other products to create different looks, which you'll see with the second and third card. Now, something I like to show in videos is that whenever I have a new interactive card to try out, I like to do a mock-up or kind of like a template or a practice run. So that's what I'll start with. I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card, and I'm going to lay that open. Then I will take the die that is in the basic Knock Knock Who's There die set. And this is the one that's an arch with a little arrow at the top left and bottom left. And I'm putting a little Sharpie on it so you can see those little arrows. Now the die doesn't actually cut between those arrows, but it cuts the rest of it. So those little arrows will help us to get the positioning just right. It is super, super easy to do. Really impressed with how Lawn Fawn designed this. Now later in this video, I'll show you how to use other dies instead of this door, but for now, let's go with the door. Now the top left arrow lines up with the crease on your card, and then the bottom left arrow lines up with the bottom edge of your card. Now you could make the door higher if you wanted to. You can make it anywhere along that crease or fold line of your card, but I'm going to go with that bottom corner because I plan to do the tree card, and the tree die lines up with it. So I've taped that in place. You can see that it lines up with the crease or the fold of my card and the bottom of the card. And I'll run that through my die cut machine. And you'll see that this creates a door on the front of your card. And the hinge of the door is the fold of your card. And it's so easy to do. And remember, you could use the rectangle die set if you prefer to have a rectangle door. It works just the same way. Okay, the next die you'll need is from, again, that basic first Knock Knock Who's There die set. And it is the die that creates the tracks. So it looks like this. It just cuts 2 slits in your cardstock, but it's designed to get it in just the right spot. So you want to lay your card flat open again. And the arrow, the little cut arrow in the die, points towards the door. And that little arm sticking down lines up with the bottom of the door. Whether you put the door up high or low, just make sure the bottom little arm of this die lines up with the bottom of the door. So in this case, it lines up with the bottom of our card. And that edge where that arrow is, that right edge will line up right with the crease of your card. Super easy to do. Once you've done it once, you'll remember. All right, and so when you run that through, it cuts these 2 slits on the inside of your card. Don't worry, they'll be hidden. Just stick with me. But you have a door and then 2 slits on the inside. This makes it so easy to create. Next, you have the T-shaped die that, again, comes in the basic Knock Knock Who's There die set. This die cuts a long T shape, and there is a score line towards the edge. I'm going to put a mark on there with a black pen just so you can see it in the video. There's a score or fold line there. I prefer to cut 2 of these, and I like to cut between that score line and where the top of the T starts. So it's just this rectangle. And that little rectangle there, I will glue onto the back of my other T. Again, in that same area, right in the middle, between where the top of the T starts and that score line. The reason I like to add this here is it gives more strength to this arm. This is going to be the arm that does the pop-up. So by putting that bit extra in there, it is nice and strong, but it still folds nicely on that score line. And you have that T edge at the top that's just 1 layer thick. Now, if you're using super thick cardstock, you probably don't need to put that extra support in there, but I did use it on all 3 of my cards today. Now we'll take the top of the T and slide it into those 2 track lines or slits that we've cut on the inside of our card. And you'll see that it can move freely, and the back of the T sticks out the back of the card. Don't worry, we'll hide that later on. So this is how it'll slide when we open and close the door on the front of the card. And they designed this to make it super easy to do from here. So you'll take this T and push it all the way to the right, and make sure that your T is lined up between those slits in the card. So you can see it's lined up there nicely. Then the edge of the T, the other end where the flap is, lines up perfectly with the fold line of our card. That's because Lawn Fawn loves us and designs these perfectly. Now you put some strong adhesive right on that little flap to the left of the score line and close the door on it. And that's it. This is what creates the mechanism that will pull a surprise out when we open this door. Now you want to put something heavy on that while it dries. Make sure you use something strong there, either your favorite strong glue or your favorite strong double-sided tape. I put a magnet on that while it dries, and while it dries, I will use a black pen to show you where you'll put your adhesive. Now I'm going to glue this closed. Don't worry, I'll show you how to turn it into a card later. I recommend using foam tape or craft foam in here. Now you could use foam tape, which I'll do in my other examples, but here I'm using some craft foam. It has a little dimension to it. This is from Spellbinders. It comes in lots of colors. And you just want to cut a piece that fills in that area above the door. So notice how I will be putting this above the door opening. You don't want to put it below the door opening because then you'll see it through the door. So I'm using brown here because I haven't had a reason to use brown. It comes black, white, and every color you can imagine. But you could use foam tape if you don't have craft foam. So I put some adhesive up there. I'll place the craft foam down. And notice it's above the door. Then I will do a little strip here to the right of our mechanism. So you could use foam tape here if you prefer. I put a black pen along the bottom of the card, but I do not recommend putting any foam tape there. That was a mistake. You only want foam tape above the mechanism and to the right of it because we don't want to hinder the movement of that mechanism. All right. So you should be able to move this open and closed without any problem after you put your foam tape or craft foam there. All right, so now I'll put glue onto the other side of this craft foam, and we're going to close this card up. So this isn't actually a card anymore. This will be the front of our card. We'll glue it onto a card base later. So now you have your fun card with that hidden door along the bottom. Now there is a regular door die in that basic Knock Knock Who's There die set that creates a nicer door, like something pretty you could cut from whatever cardstock you want. And there are dies in there that create little frames that you could have hanging on the door and little doorknobs that could be either a heart or a circle. Then I like to use the older, much older Lawn Fawn Push Here stamp set. There's a stamp in there that says Open Me. It's super tiny and it'll fit inside of those little frames that you can have hanging on your door. And I will show you that in my first card, and I'll do something different for my second and third cards. I really wanted to show you how you can stretch this die set to do lots of different things. All right, now it's time to put this onto a card base. You could do side folding or top folding. It is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, but you'll see I kind of change this up later. Now I flipped over our mechanism here, so we're looking at the back of it, and we can put liquid or double-sided adhesive all the way over the back of this except around that mechanism. Don't go anywhere close to the mechanism, only go where I put the black pen, because we don't want to hinder the movement of those little orange T's from sliding back and forth along the track. So we can just put this down, no need for foam tape for this. And then we have our card with the hidden door on the front of it. And we can add different things to that orange that slides in and out. And I will show you some tips about that later as we create cards. Now you could put your door higher again if you wanted to, so you could have maybe a ground below it, lots of different things. And Lawn Fawn has a ton of examples using this die set, so I encourage you to check out their website, and I'll have links for it all below. All right, so now that we've done a mock-up here, a practice that I can save for later and refer to it, let's make a card. Let's start with the basic one, and it's pretty much using the dies as they were intended to be used. And it'll create this little door that opens up to show a critter inside of the tree. I will show you how to stretch this with my second and third cards. All right, let's start out with our note card. So I have a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 inch cardstock, just a half sheet, and I'm scoring it right down the middle at 4.25. So we have a side folding note card that is 4.25 by 5.5 inches. Now for my card, I want this, the front, what will be the front of the card where the door is, to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to trim a little bit off the top and the side. So in the end, I'll have a note card that is 4 inches by 5.25 inches. Now this, again, remember we're going to glue shut because it's going to be the front of our card, and I'll put it on a regular size card base later. But right now, all you need to know is this is a 4 by 5.25 inch white note card. All right, next up I have the Lawn Fawn Cloudy Stencil. This is a much older stencil. I really like this one and I use it often. And I also have Lawn Fawn Ink. I think this is the kiddie pool color, and a Pink Fresh blending brush. And I'm just doing a very light application of this ink right along one of those cloudy edges. So I did one towards the top, then I rotate the stencil and I move down and do another. And I'll continue to do that. And the thing I like about the stencil is that there are 4 different cloud structures, or whatever you want to say, or formations. So you don't have like a repeated formation going down your card. You could do the 4 different sides here, then you could clean it and use the other side and you have 4 more. But it's a nice way to create a cloudy scene, and it works well with a variety of style of cards. All right, now it's time to use the interactive die set. I'll use the basic Knock Knock Who's There die set. We have the arch door with the little arrows on it, and I will line it up as I showed you in the example before. The top arrow lines up with the crease or fold line of the card. The bottom left arrow lines up with the bottom of the card. You just hold it there, run it through your die cut machine, and this will create the door right there on the bottom left on the front of your card. Now for this card, when you open up the door, I want it to be dark brown on the inside, not white, because it's like the inside of a tree, right? The tree will be around the door. So I need to turn the inside of my card in that door area dark brown. So I'm just going to take a Lawn Fawn, I think this is walnut colored ink, and I'm just going to take it direct to paper to cover the inside of the door and the area to the right of it with this ink. Now you could instead glue cardstock there, but nobody's going to see how messy this is, and it'll be just fine. So now you can see when you open up the door, it's brown inside. Again, there are many ways you can do this. That just seemed the easiest at the time. Now I've also cut the T from white cardstock, and I'll cover this with the same dark brown ink so that if you see this T when you open up the door, it blends in with the color behind it. And then I'll cut another of the T, and I'll cut with my scissors between the score line and the top of the T to create that extra support that I'll glue behind our one that we inked with the brown. Again, you may not have to add this extra support to the back. If you're using a really heavyweight cardstock, you could skip this, but I'm using heavyweight cardstock and decided to double up in that area just in case, because I plan to open and close this door a lot, and I don't want that to be weak. All right, now let's open our card up and lay it flat, and we'll use the die that creates the tracks for our card. So we'll put that little arrow so it's up against the fold of the card, and that little arm sticking out the bottom will line up with the bottom of the card. Run that through our die cut machine, and we'll have the tracks on the inside there. You can see the cut tracks. It looks like a hot mess in there, but remember, we're going to glue that closed. No one will see it. Now, before I finish off that mechanism and glue it closed, I want to get the front of my card set up. In case I want to stamp something on there, I want it to be nice and flat when I stamp it. So I'm using a much older die set. This is the stitched Hillside die border dies from Lawn Fawn. This has been out forever. And I cut that from some green cardstock. And I'm gluing this right along the bottom. I just want to have a little bit of ground there. But before I glued it down, I thought it might be nice to do a little inking on the top edge. So I'm coming in with an ink blending tool and Lawn Fawn Noble Fur Green, which is a perfect like evergreen color for the holidays. And I'll glue that right along the bottom. And I'm just moving it around to see where I want it to be. And then I can flip this over and trim off all that excess. So you can see I just used a scrap of green cardstock here that I had left over. So I'm flipping it over, cutting it so that it goes right up to the door and right up to the edge of the card. So I'm just kind of creating a scene on the front of this card. Now you could simplify this scene by all means, but I had some fun creating it. I think that's half the fun of Lawn Fawn products. Now let's create the tree that goes around the door. Remember this die set, the Knock Knock Who's There tree add-on die set? I used that for the tree that I'm about to build. So I used the tree trunk and that little scallop die that creates the leaves in the tree. I didn't use the apples, but you definitely could if you wanted to. Off screen, I used that scallop die to cut 3 tiers for our tree. One from dark green, one from medium green, and one from light green. And I did a little bit of inking with that Noble Fur ink. I cut the tree trunk itself from Lawn Fawn paper bag cardstock and did a little inking on it with the walnut ink. So I did those off screen just to save a little bit of time, but they're easy to create and you can make this tree as full or as simple as you want. So I'm putting down the darkest green first, right up in the top left corner of my card. Then I will glue down the tree trunk and then the other 2 tiers of the top of the tree. I think it'd be fun to use pattern paper for these if you wanted to, but keep in mind that these dies offer some details. So like that scallop there has faux stitching on it, and then the tree trunk has little lines that it creates. So if you use pattern paper, you lose those details. So that's why I decided to go with the solid cardstock and a little bit of inking on it. So now we have our tree that goes around that door, and I can trim off any of the excess. The last step for that tree on the outside is to use the solid arch door die from the Knock Knock Who's There die set. I cut that from paper bag cardstock once again, added some inking with walnut colored ink, and I glue that onto the front of our hinged door. So now you can see how it looks like a nice tree with a little door on it when the card is closed. Okay, now we need to create the little critters that'll slide in and out when you open and close that door. Now you could put a variety of things in here. I'll show you some other examples later, but for this one, I thought I'd use the older Lawn Fawn Little Woodland Library stamp set. There are coordinating dies for this, but today I decided to fussy cut instead. I'll be using a sentiment and images from that. Now, one of the things Lawn Fawn has come out with in the past year are coordinating stencils to quickly color their images. If you're like me and struggle with coloring or don't enjoy coloring, which is like me also, these are really handy, especially with these tiny images. Look how quickly I'm able to add color to these tiny images. I really appreciate how Lawn Fawn has designed these stencils, and I really wanted to demonstrate this again because you can see there are etched lines that line up with the stamped image. So you can easily line these up and add color to it however you want, even to the tiniest little pieces, which you can see on the bunny noses up on the top right. For the book here, I'll be using one of my favorite Lawn Fawn ink colors. It's Lobster. Lobster is like the true red color that we all have been trying to look for. I've recommended it many times in videos. If you need a true red for the holidays, Lobster is a good option. Next up, I have a little image here that has a stack of books. And look there are even these tiny openings to quickly color those books. You just move from one to another. And in this stencil set are all the stencils you need to color all of the images in the coordinating stamp set. And then, of course, there's the coordinating die set. But keep in mind, these are just options. I think some people get overwhelmed by all the options, but you can pick and choose what you like, which I think is fantastic. For example, I'm using the stamps and the stencils, but I'm not going to use the dies. Instead, I want to fussy cut right up to the outlined black image. It's completely up to you, and it's nice to have those options. I have a few more stamped images. Next, I have the Lawn Fawn All the Speech Bubbles. This is a must-have set. It has lots of tiny sentiments and speech bubbles, and I stamped Hello Friend in a speech bubble, and that'll go on the inside of the door also. Then I have this final little critter that has glasses and is reading a book, and I'll do the same quick coloring with the stencils. I really like the Manatee Gray color from Lawn Fawn. That's a great gray that's a bit on the lighter side, and I use that to color this little critter. Look how quick I was able to do that thanks to the stencils. Also notice they designed these stencils, as I mentioned, to do the tiniest little things. So I'm able to even leave those glasses white or color them whatever color I want. It's nice that they include all of these little details. It's something that you don't see with a lot of other stencils from other companies. But also keep in mind, these images would be pretty easy to color with markers or colored pencils, but honestly, I prefer the stencils. Then I used my scissors to fussy cut these. Yeah, I know, not everybody likes fussy cutting, but I just thought it would work best for my card design, so it was worth the time for me. So I'm adding this little guy who's reading a book and laying on the grass outside of my card, and then we need to stamp the sentiment above it. Then we'll add what goes inside of that door on the tree. So I'm stamping a sentiment from that same Woodland library stamp set that all the critters are from. All right, so now let's work on that inside. We need to add our little T element that moves. Notice there's some adhesive in there. I had taken this apart, so just ignore that. But we're going to take our inked up T and tuck the top of the T in between those two slits or tracks that the die created on the inside of the card. We're going to line it up straight there all the way to the right, and the left edge of the T will line up with the fold line on our card. We're going to put some liquid adhesive or strong tape, any kind of strong adhesive, on that little flap there to the left of the fold line on that T. We'll close the door onto that and put something heavy on it while it dries. Now it's time to add the little images that we want to have slide in and out as you open the door. Now I made mine a little more complicated than you need to. You definitely could follow some of the examples on Lawn Fawn and just glue any images you want onto that T strip that comes in and out as you open the door. I wanted my little guys to sit on a bit of ground inside of the tree. So I'm going to create a little mound for them to sit on. You could use a border die to do this, but I just free cut it with some scissors, and I'm going to create this mound that I want to go right about there. So this mound will slide out when you open the door, along with the little critters that'll sit on it. Now it was a little too tall, so I'm going to trim that down. So I just wanted to demonstrate you can put a variety of things on that little slider or T-shaped piece. But you want to make sure that it doesn't hang out past the edge of that T-shaped piece on the left, and that it fits along the bottom of the card. So I'm gluing this to the bottom of the card, but notice the tip of the mound goes right to the edge of that T-shaped piece, and it can slide in and out. You just want to constantly test that it works to slide in and out as you open and close the door. Now this is a little too long, so I'm just going to trim that short, but you can see how it's glued right onto that T-shape, that little strip that goes across. As long as it moves, you'll have no problem at all. And you want to just make sure you can open and close the door without it folding. Now onto this you can add any pieces you want. I decided to add the little speech bubble to the inside of the door itself, and I'll add these little critters onto that T-shape and to that mound. Now this is very important. Whatever image you put to the right on this door opening, you want it to tuck under the door frame on the right. So notice I tucked this under that door opening. The reason you want to have it tucked under is that when you close it, you don't want it to get hooked onto the door frame. So by tucking that right edge of the book image under the door opening, it'll open and close freely. Now, Lawn Fawn has lots of examples and videos on different ways to tuck an image under there. It's pretty easy to do. Then my little critter is kind of tucked under the left-hand edge of the books, and then I have this little worm that I'll add on the bottom on that mound. The key is to just keep opening and closing it and making sure that it does so freely. If it doesn't, just make sure you move it until it does. All right, so now I know that this will open and close freely, so we can glue the inside. Now, last time I used craft foam. This time I'm using double-sided foam adhesive. This is from Altenew. It's a 1-inch wide, and then I cut a thin piece for this right edge. But you'll notice I'm putting it in the same area that I did on the first example. So I put it to the right of the mechanism and above the mechanism and door. And you can see this will move freely in and out. You just always want to test and make sure that nothing is hindering that opening and closing. Once you're sure it's okay, you can take off the release paper, close that up, and now you have the front of your card. And by the way, when I was adding those little critters on the inside, I was using like a dot adhesive that I know I could move if I needed to. At this point, I know I'm happy with the placement, so I'm removing those and adding a strong liquid adhesive behind them so I know they'll stay secure. So sometimes it's good to use a dot runner to just temporarily put something down to try it out and then put something strong behind it, like liquid adhesive, to make sure it's secure. And there we have all of our little critters on the inside. All is good, and it opens and closes nicely. Off screen, I did add a few details. I used the frame dies from the Knock Knock Who's There die set to create a little frame that goes on the front of the door that says Open Me, and that is from the Push Me stamp set that I showed you earlier. Then I used the very old Lawn Fawn Butterfly Kisses stamp set, one of my all-time favorites, to stamp a little butterfly that I added to the front of the card. Now it's time to add this onto a card base. Now remember, this whole card front that we created with the interactive element was 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I'm putting liquid adhesive in the areas that I marked with the black pen. Really, it's everywhere around that mechanism on the back of that panel. And I'm adding this to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card. I prefer top folding. I know not everyone does, but I feel like they stand up on display better, so that's why I prefer to use them. Also, they're different than store-bought, so that's another reason. But you could do side folding if you prefer. All right, so now we have our completed card. When you open up that little door, you have the little critters that slide out, and I love that surprise. Oh, by the way, I used a little gold gem for the doorknob and for the hook on that little frame that we have on the front. Here's a closer look at all of those little details. You could have saved time by using the coordinating dies or by using less little images, but I wanted to make this card extra special for an extra special friend. So this card is really using the products basically how Lawn Fawn intended them to be used. My next 2 cards, we're going to stretch them and use them with some older supplies, maybe some things that you might have on hand to create something different. Let's next do the balloon card. Now this one, when you open up that balloon on the left, it reveals some cash on the inside, which makes it really fun, but you could skip the cash and instead do another little image or sentiment. This uses the very, very old Lawn Fawn Party Balloon die set. I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. It's a top folding note card that I'm turning on its side. I'm laying it open and taking the largest balloon die and lining it up so like the left edge hangs over that fold line there. I'll put a little piece of tape, and we're going to run this through our die cut machine, but we'll do partial die cutting. Partial die cutting is easy to do with any machine. You just lay everything down onto your cutting plates. Then the top cutting plate you place so it is the edge is where you want the cutting to stop. So I'm lining up the edge of that top cutting plate with the fold line of our card. So anything under that top cutting plate will cut. Anything hanging out, that little edge of the balloon, will not cut. When you run that through, you end up with a hinge. So basically, I made this balloon a door. So I'm not using the door dies from earlier. Instead, I'm using the balloon. I will still, however, use the die that creates the tracks from that Knock Knock Who's There basic die set. Now I'll open up the card and lay it down. And again, I've got this die so that the arrow points towards that crease or fold line of the card. However, since this is so big, I don't want my tracks to be too far to the left here. I want it to be over to the right a little bit so you don't see the tracks when the door is open. So let me show you how to avoid that. You just take this and instead of having it lined up with the fold line of the card, you just move it over to the left a little bit. So you can see there's about a 1/2 inch there between the arrow on this die, that right edge of the die, and the fold line. So the reason I'm doing this again is notice our balloon is wider than the door die that this track was designed to go with. So by moving it over to the left a bit, it'll help to hide those tracks when it's closed. So just watch me here. I'm going to run this through. Again, you can see it shifted over to the left a little bit. Run that through, and now when you open up the balloon, you don't see the tracks over to the right. Because there's plenty of room since this is a side card, absolutely fine to do this. Now let's finish off that opening mechanism. So I cut 2 of the T die from white cardstock. And as I've done before in this video, I'm going to cut between the score line and the top of the T there and glue that onto the back of the other so that that center section of our T mechanism has some strength to it. I think this is especially important because we're going to be adding some money on it, and we don't want this to fail when we open it up. So I need to fold my cash here so that it fits between that fold line on our little T shape and the top of the T. So I'm just kind of playing around with this to see how I can fold it to fit in that area. Then I put some tape runner and I'll lay my money onto it. I feel like tape runner will rub off easily so the person could easily remove it. You could also use glue dots. I will then tuck the top of the T portion into those tracks, and let's just test it out. Let's see if that money will fit through the balloon opening. It looks like it will. So I will open it back up, and I'll push the T all the way to the right inside of the tracks, and that will cause the left edge where the flap is on that T to line up with the fold line of our card. I'll put liquid adhesive onto that little flap and then close the balloon door onto it. So my liquid adhesive will go where I put that black pen. I know it's hard to see white on white cardstock, so I wanted to be able to show that to you. So put the adhesive on it, close our little balloon door onto it, and give it some time to dry there. Notice the liquid adhesive is not touching the money. All right, so once that's dry, let me test it. I'm going to open this up, and I realize the money barely fits through that opening. So I need to fold my money to be a little bit tighter. So I'm going to take this off and fold it a bit more and put it back onto that double-sided adhesive. So you can play around with this in different ways. If you prefer to add a gift card in your card, don't worry, my next example will show how to do that. If you don't want to add anything in here, you could instead put a sentiment or little critter like we did on the first example. So I'm putting that back into that dot adhesive and then close this, and let's test it and see if it opens and closes. Because the right edge of our money is tucked under that balloon opening when it's opened, it'll be no problem and it won't get caught. So I'm ready for this. It's time to finish the front of our card. All right, now for the balloons, I thought it'd be fun to have the same color balloons, but in different specialty cardstock. So I'm reaching for a product I love, the Spellbinders Treasured Cardstock. This is the Aquamarine pack. They have packs available in all different colors, but it's nice because they have glitter cardstock, mirror cardstock, matte metallic, and more, all in one pack, so you have lots of options. So I cut a bunch of balloons using the Lawn Fawn Party Balloons and this cardstock. Then we can start gluing them together. First, one of them I'll glue right onto the front of our balloon hinge door, and we can cut the little excess off on the left. Then I'll start arranging balloons around it. For the 2 balloons that I want to look like they're tucked behind this door, I don't want them actually in the way of the door. So what I do is I lay the balloon down, and then I'll take the round balloon die that cut out the door, and I'll just lay it right on top of the glitter one and tape it there. Then I run that through my die cut machine, and that basically cuts a little chunk out of the top right of the balloon so that I can glue it there onto the front of the card and it doesn't hinder the door. It doesn't get in the way of the door. And I'll do the same thing for the balloon that goes kind of to the right bottom of that big balloon door. As I assemble these, I thought I should mention you could create your own balloons from different size circle dies and then just put a little knot at the bottom of them and draw the string in yourself with a pen. I just really like that this die set has different size and shape balloons, and then there are also dies that create the strings that hang from them, which you'll see in a little bit. You could also use different colors of cardstock for all of these balloons, but I thought these different finishes of specialty cardstock would be nice. So I continued to add balloons, those could all overlap with no problem, to go across the card. Then I'm using a Celebrate You sentiment, this is from Concord and 9th, that will go on top. The Celebrate You actually has the shadow, which I cut from white, and then the word Celebrate You, which I cut from the specialty cardstock, that treasured cardstock from Spellbinders, from the black pack. So it's a black glitter cardstock on top of the white shadow. Some of these balloons I did stack up, so there's a little bit more dimension to them. And I forgot that the die set has little dies that cut the reflections that you can add onto each of the balloons. I really feel like that makes them pop, and I just cut that from a lighter color of regular cardstock. As I mentioned, these party balloon dies from Lawn Fawn include the strings. I cut those from Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock, and I'm gluing them below the balloons. Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock is one of my favorites. It's a super light gray, not too warm, not too cool. Highly recommend it. All right, once those balloon strings are done, it's time to add our foam tape to the inside. I am placing the foam tape all around that mechanism, but I want to make sure that I don't get in the way of the mechanism. So I'm putting it below the balloon door opening, above the balloon door opening, into the right of the mechanism. So you can cut your foam tape or craft foam to however best fits that. On the back of this panel, we can add our adhesive. Just make sure it doesn't get anywhere that hinders the movement of that sliding piece. So I put it all around the mechanism, and then I'll add it onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. I finished the card off by adding a little bling here and there using Trinity Stamps Bubble Bath Baubles, and that's it. You can see how that balloon opens easily, so it reveals the money on the inside. I did stamp Open Me with black ink on that balloon that serves as the door using the Push Me stamp set from Lawn Fawn. So this shows you how you can stretch that basic knock knock who's there door die set to make other things open as a hinge instead of a door. And I think this is a fun surprise and definitely a fun way to give someone a bit of cash for a celebration. Now my next card shows how to use a big heart die to create a fun door. And this one actually has a gift card inside. You could do this with a basic circle or other large shape. And again, I'm just using that basic knock knock who's there door die set from Lawn Fawn along with the other basic shape. So I have a note card here that is 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. In the end, this will be a 5 by 7 card. I'm also using some heart dies from Lawn Fawn that I've had for the longest time and I use quite often. I've die cut some pieces here and I have a sentiment from Concord and 9th, and I'm just kind of laying things out. I'm going to use the largest heart die over on the left edge of this card to create our hinged door. Now, my card was originally 5 by 7. I did, as I mentioned, trim this down to be 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. So it's a little bit smaller than 5 by 7. That way I can put a mat on it when I'm done. So I'm taking the largest heart die, making sure some of it's hanging off that left folded edge of the card. And I'll run this through my die cut machine, doing the same partial die cutting trick that I did on the last card. So I'll open it up. Ignore that I did some stenciling on the back. No one will ever see that. I changed my mind. I'll place the top cutting plate so the edge of the top cutting plate lines up with the fold line of our card. I'll run that through and it'll only cut onto the front of our card. So now we have a hinged heart. So you can do this again with many different shapes. I will still use this track die from the Lawn Fawn Knock Knock Who's There basic die set. And I'm going to again tape it down so that it's a little bit left of the fold line of our card. That way the track lines are a little bit farther over. Then I will run that through our die cut machine. We have the track lines in there. Now you'll notice when I open up this heart, you'll see the track lines. But that's okay because I'll hide them with the gift card I'm putting on the inside. Really, it doesn't matter if they can see them anyways. I've cut 2 of the T shape. Once again, from one of them, I'll cut that center portion off and I'll glue it onto the back of the other T shape for that added support. I do think that's important with this one because you have that large gift card that you're going to be sliding in and out. So you want this to be strong and not fold at all. I'll tuck the top of the T into the 2 slits as I've done many times in this video. And I'll lay it down so the right side of the T is all the way to the right and the left flap of that T is right up to the fold of our card. I'll put liquid adhesive on that flap, you can see it there, and close the heart onto it. And believe it or not, this mechanism works with that big heart opening. Now, you could make that mechanism longer, the T mechanism longer. I experimented with that and I found there really wasn't a need. When you open up this door, you will see those tracks, but I don't think they're that noticeable, and you can still add whatever you want on them. You just always need to test it out when you put something on there to make sure it opens and closes nicely. I put some tape runner, the little dot adhesive, onto the front of that mechanism, and I'll add my gift card onto it. You could also use glue dots for this. I decided to put it on just like this, so the left edge of the gift card goes right onto the folded edge of that mechanism, right up against the heart door. And then I can test that out and open and close it and see, and it works just fine. So for a gift card, you need a bigger opening, right? But you could use a smaller heart and use cash or a little sentiment to open and close there. Totally up to you. But this one, I'm going to be using this one a lot because I'm always looking for special ways to add a gift card to a card. Now it's time to add hearts to the front of this. I put one large heart right onto the front of the door, and then we have the other size hearts to go around it. I like that this die set, which is super old from Lawn Fawn, it does 3 different size hearts, and it has faux stitching on the inside and outside of the cutting edge, so you have lots of details you can add. Once I completed the front of the card, I can flip it over and put adhesive all around the mechanism. Just make sure you don't get in the way of the mechanism, just all around it. And then I'll glue it onto a piece of purple cardstock that is cut to 5 by 7 inches. You could have made this card in a smaller size, but that heart was really big. You would have to use a smaller heart if you wanted to do a smaller card size, or you could do a sideways card. I did forget to put the foam tape to the inside, so I'm adding that now. Notice I'm putting it all around the mechanism, but it's not in the way of the mechanism or that gift card. It'll still be able to move freely. Last but not least, I added this onto a 5 by 7 note card. Now I did add some smaller silver glitter hearts. Those I created with the older Lawn Fawn Sequin mix dies. I love these because they create faux sequin shapes that you can cut from specialty cardstock. And I like that there are 3 sizes of hearts, which are great to scatter on your cards. Now when I opened this, I realized I made it so that my foam tape was actually showing through that heart opening. That was my mistake, so all I'll do is use a craft knife to just cut that foam tape out because we don't want this door to seal closed and the person not realize there's a gift card in there. I did stamp Open Me using the Lawn Fawn Push Me stamp set that I showed you earlier. I used the bigger Open Me sentiment. I stamped it up on the top of the purple heart with the purple ink. Now you can see how this opens and closes nicely. This one would be a fun one to change up to have a large tree or star die for a holiday card and have that gift card inside. So there you have it, 3 different ways to create a hidden door card with a surprise inside. I hope this video is helpful to you and inspires you to create also. If you're interested in the supplies I use, they are linked below in the YouTube description along with that free gift option. And at the end here, I'll link to a couple other videos that have similar types of cards. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again soon.